because after looking at the schedule, there's some really important things happening right after this, and I do not want to keep anyone from more professionalism and collegiality that exists, myself included. So anyhow, it was mentioned earlier that several on the agenda just like kind of got tossed on, and I was one of those. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about technology, but unlike maybe some of the other workshops that you sat through, I am not about to tell you all the secrets of technology. This is very much meant to be an idea share. So we are going to work together and collaborate just a little bit, put our minds together to see what some ideas that we could share, things that are best practices from you that maybe you have either written about or seen, or maybe have received some technology grants through. And so hopefully everybody came with that type of spirit, and we'll get in and out of here as quickly as possible. So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time talking about the technology grants. So we're going to spend just a little bit of time talking about some grant support, just some timelines, amounts, that kind of stuff. So if you're unfamiliar with technology grants, we're going to talk about that. For those of you that's like old news, you've done this several times or have been fortunate to receive some of those grants, we'll talk through some tips and tricks, and this is where we're going to rely on some expertise in the room if any of you have some things to add. And then lastly, we'll spend some time doing the idea share piece, doing a little bit of collaboration, your work independently together with the group, and then we'll come back together and sharing some of those ideas. So on some grant support, I should probably mention before I get too far in, my partner in crime, Cameron Dale, also helped me out with this. So even though my name might be on this, this is really a collaboration spirit from the start. So just some technology grant support. So one of the things that I think was just most important is to know, when are we even talking about these career technology grants? Some of you are very familiar with this. Some of this might be some new information. So I want to spend just a little bit of time going over a timeline. Those applications typically, they don't always, but typically open up in January. It looked like it was about the second week of January this past year that they opened up. That application goes live. You can find that application and tons of resources on the Career Tech website. What's really awesome, thankfully our Ag Ed department is on their A game when it comes to technology grants, and usually all of those links are also on our homepage for the Ag Ed Department of Career Tech. So it's really helpful. So those open up about January. They are due in March. Typically around March 1st is when they are due. Sometimes that date changes just a little bit. This year they actually backed it up about 2 weeks. We had an extension, but typically they are due at the 1st of March. They are due electronically. Some of you maybe in the past might have submitted those differently. You submit those to an email address. If you're in a big school like Bartlesville, we don't actually always hit the email send. Sometimes we have some people that help out with us because it requires a letter from your superintendent. You must have a letter of support from your superintendent. It's nothing fancy, but it is a requirement. If you don't have that, then your application is incomplete and you are not in the consideration. So that is just a really easy, quick check mark box. Again, if you're in a big school, that also means that if you're trying to get in with your superintendent, it's going to take some time. We don't often just run over to the superintendent's office and say, hey, I need a letter real quick. Some of you might have that luxury, but we do not. So we've got to kind of plan ahead for that. Thankfully, they do know, because we have applied for these grants, that they do know that that is coming, but it's important that you know that and can plan ahead. So in May is when the recipients are supposed to be notified. And last year in 2022, and that is incorrect, they missed the board meeting, and so it wasn't until last Thursday, that the grants were announced. So for those of you, anybody in here get a grant this year? A couple of you? One? Okay, congrats. Awesome. We're going to be really excited to hear about what you are about to purchase. So those get announced. There's some process. There's a memorandum of understanding that gets sent out. That has to be signed back in, basically just saying like, hey, you got the money and you're going to fulfill what you said you were going to purchase. What's really unique about this grant, unlike maybe some of the other grants that you have, it's not just a lump cash sum that you get and you spend however you want to. This one is really strict. We're following, because it's federal dollars that are being used for this. So it's important that whatever you submit for your budget, you're also going to make sure that you're going to purchase. If you choose not to, that's okay. You can do that, but there's a change form that you have to fill out, and it has to be approved by Mr. Nemechek, and then that gets sent on. So there's like a process to work through. So it's important that you take the time, be very diligent in what you're going to use that money for. You begin to make those purchases July 1. You can start coding those things. Hopefully your finance department is familiar with that, but it's all in that packet of what you code things to making sure that everything is good to go. You can receive up to $15,000 for a technology grant. For a few of you that in the past, there used to be like a couple of $25,000 ones and all the others. It's just 15 across the board now. So $15,000 is what you can have up to. I think ours was like $5 short of $15,000. Ours was, it was over. Cameron screwed up. It was over. Okay. You can apply every other year. It uses your PID. So I applied for a grant last year. Cameron applied for one this year. So then we'll work on making another application for the next year. So it's based off your PID. So if you move schools, it's your PID that is that this is attached to. So if you receive a grant, must have a letter of support. We talked about that. What's really awesome is if you've done lots of grants, what's great about this one is there is absolutely no follow-up report that you have to do. As long as your finances are turned in, that's all you have to worry about. We've done some grants in the past, and they require like mid-year check-ins and pictures and some write-ups. So we don't have to worry about any of that with a Career Tech grant. This is pretty simple, no follow-up report. So I love that piece. It's not any extra work. Once you've done the grant work at the beginning, most of that's taken care of. So, all right, so we're going to depend on some experts in the room. Anything to add that I miss on some we haven't got to the tips and tricks yet, but anything on some basic career grant or technology grant supports that would be important to know? Yes?
The terminology you use to describe the things you want.
Yes.
Use basic terms, make it sound like you're smarter than you are.
That's good. We're going to get to some tips and tricks with that, so we're going to come back to that one. Any others on this piece?
I would, like, one thing that we ran into is make sure you pick a vendor that's, I don't know, easy to work with, and that is going to be able to kind of ride some of these waves of shipping problems and whatnot, because people start yelling at you if you don't buy it closer to July 1 than December 31st, and so they want that money back.
They want it in place starting 2022. So the MOU says they want kids to start using it the first day of class 2022 or whenever it is. And that's obviously not 100% feasible, but like what you're saying, they don't want to see that you waited until December or January to start purchasing items. They get very grumpy about that.
Everything has to be turned back in on your grant, saying that you've purchased everything by February 1. So your turnaround time may seem like a lot, but by the time you consider vendors and shipping and some of those things, we have taken, it's been months since we've gotten some of our products in, and so that can be a little scary when you've got to get it to the, everything's got to be done, all your money spent by February 1. So sometimes you do have to watch that. So Cameron and I put together just some tips and tricks that we thought that we've used and have thought about. So Chase mentioned about the terminology. They love cutting edge technology. They love things that are above and beyond the typical school provided piece of technology. They're looking for something a little bit different and unique. The evaluation piece of this is not done just by our Ag Ed department. They have a little bit of a say, but it's also with the other state directors. So we also have to consider that some of our terminology, we might use some ag lingo that some of those evaluators may not be familiar with. So take the extra time, use the extra characters, and really explain some of those details. We learned the hard way about working with your technology department. Bartlesville is a big school. We put some things on our technology grant. It was approved, and then when it came time to purchase, they said, oh yeah, you actually can't purchase those things. Superintendent's already approved it. The technology department approved it at one point, but unfortunately, when it came down to actually making the purchase, they said, no, our district does not provide support for those products. So it is really important that you're working with your technology department to making sure that whatever items you are buying can be beneficial and can be used in your district. On the website, you can't use anything for you can use it for some subscriptions, but you can't use it for like monthly purchases. So if you said, I really would like an iPad, the technology grant can't pay for the services for the iPad. Okay, you can purchase equipment, but you can't purchase those services. So you've got to make sure that you have the support that you need through your local district to be able to make some of those things. Get actual quotes. I think this is what Tim was maybe alluding to just a little bit, making sure that you're using reputable vendors. If you have to set them up as a vendor, there's some hoops of fire that you may need to work through. Cameron and I work really hard to get actual quotes that have a time stamp on them, and they're good for so many days. That's really helpful as you're beginning to work through. We try to make some purchases through Amazon, which that might be a great vendor for you, but as you probably well know, the prices on Amazon change. And so sometimes that can be very difficult working with a technology grant that you may end up not spending as much money and you may not be able to get as much out of your purchase. So keep that in mind. watch your shipping and handling, installation, any of those things. You can spend up to 5% of your grant total on installation and shipping. I know of some schools that have gotten in a bind where they got the product, but then when they didn't get an adequate or an accurate quote, ended up spending more money, and that's a huge issue. So you can have up to 5% over, but making sure that you realize that shipping and handling and installation needs to be a part of that quote that you're getting. So stay organized. Cameron and I, we use Google Docs, obviously, for everything that we do, but we use Google Docs for us when we're building the narrative components and we're talking about our ag program, our budget justification. We get to do that, and so Cameron is really the guru at this, but we go back and forth, and we get to kind of work together on some of that. We build our budget in Google Sheets, and we link those things in. So if we're seeking approval from our technology department, it's really easy. We just add that URL in, and the technology department can click on it and can look up the power requirements or the network requirements or whatever is needed out of our whatever made up thing that our technology department says that they need to be able to approve it. So we use Google Sheets and Google Docs for us to stay organized. I also put Google Drive on there because a lot of times Cameron and I will go back to past applications to see how we've used that equipment in the past. Again, we're all ag teachers, we're really busy. Sometimes I go, oh my gosh, well, I don't even know what we got last year. And so it's really helpful that we've stayed organized to be able to go back and through and do that. Otherwise, you're searching through your email to try to find the actual one. So right to the rubric. This is another important piece that I think a lot of ag teachers get in a bind. When we go to write this, that rubric is right beside us as we're writing every one of those pieces. And we're using the same language in there. And that may seem like common sense, but I know I literally just spoke to an ag teacher that said, I put down for some Chromebooks and a TV, and I'm thinking, well, those are pretty simple things. Like, that would probably be something that would be very common. But I guarantee you, if we were to look at their application, they probably missed some really easy points because they didn't write to the rubric. So that's really important. That's just good grant writing 101 for lots of things that you do, just as a quick reminder that if they provide a rubric, use it. It's there for you to do. We try to use every space character allowed. We try to get down as close as we can, and sometimes it may seem like we're really redundant on some of those things, so it requires us to be really creative. I'm writing something and Cameron goes, that doesn't make any sense. So she works her magic and helps to add some more characters for that to flow a little bit better. But to use every remaining space and character, again, these are things that I would also tell my students when we're filling out applications. It's just good grant writing 101. So I'll open it up. Those were just some real general ones. Does anybody else have other tips and tricks that we would use for some grant writing? Things that you've seen that's worked really well, or things that have not. You're like, we shouldn't do that again.
You can use numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to reach 120 students this year, and if we offer this to the 4-H club, that's an additional 30 students, or whatever. Anytime you can use numbers like that.
I think it's great too. You also mentioned, what are some other connections that you have in the community that you could use the technology for, that you can reach a broader audience? That again just really helps on that justification piece, that the impact can be much more than just one classroom. And again, if we're thinking cutting edge, if we're thinking of really big impacts, that's an easy way to be able to show that is through numbers, how many students you're impacting, how many community members you're impacting, and then what are some other organizations that you can touch as well. So that's a great idea, absolutely. Any others?
I feel like they want to know, how is it going to be sustained? Like, tell them, even if it's not in the rubric or it doesn't say that, like, what other funds are you using? How is this going to continue on? How is this going to be successful? Like, every grant I filled out this year wanted to know something like that.
So what's one of the ways that we can help with that sustainability?
Oh, I just talked about 412.
Absolutely. So there's other avenues that we can use to help support that. So using 412 money, we can use some subscription-based things. We can pay for things to help support that. So if I'm buying Chromebooks, I could use 412 money for a wide variety of applications to help support those devices. So that's a great idea, to be able to use other ways to be sustainable. Other grants to tie that in. Carl Perkins, another great idea to make sure that those are sustainable. Any others? That's a good one.
Linking it to careers that are available, if this is lining up to some, pathway or some, industry in your community, if you can say, I'm using this laser printer because it's the same kind of concept that the Pump and Motor Works is using. They have a bigger industrial size one. It's a skill that, someone could get outside of high school.
High skill, high wages, a key phrase.
It's good. Mentioned pathways, those are really important. Obviously in the career tech world, and especially in that lingo, they want to see those pathways, and for you to explain those, really good. High skill or high wage, high skill jobs in high demand jobs, those are really important. Just good lingo to be able to use, absolutely. You mentioned some community connections in there as well, so these can be students that are learning and using this equipment, and they can go out and have a job ready for them using those same things. Those are all great ideas. Any others that come to mind?
Do you feel like they changed I just did the big grant for the CERT machine.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like they ever hesitate on small things clustered together versus some really big products? Or do you think it's pretty much equal as far as creating those particular items?
I think it's tough because we've seen it both ways. We've done things that it feels like we've just nickel and dimed and just try to piece some things together, and then we've shot for the moon on a particular item. So I think it's tough to say one way or the other. They're humans that evaluate this, and so I think that's the hard part to say, no, this is the way it is meant to be. Sometimes we try to pick one big item and then work around that, and then we try to find ways that we can either support that item or ways that we can engage other parts of the program. So the grant itself can be used throughout the entire program, not just one class. I think that can be really helpful. So I would wonder just maybe on a plasma table like that, if maybe it would just be really one class where we want to try to hit more areas of the program. So anything that you could think of to add to that?
Well, I was going to say, don't be afraid to, in your big box, to really break down several goals. Sometimes I'll have a goal for the AgCom class. I'm going to have a goal for our SAEs. We're going to have so many engaged in a school-based SAE. And then I'm going to have a goal with our Ag Communications team. And in that one, we had cameras, podcast equipment, a TV, an Apple TV, an iPad. And they were all going in different places. But I really just follow first, second, third, and each of the boxes and break it up in that way. And that can also help you with your evaluation, because that always is kind of a tough one too. How am I going to evaluate this? AET records is one that I always usually go to. Some kind of goal about competing in 3 contests across the state for a CDE thing. And then obviously our certification tests or whatnot can be an easy one to plug in. But I think that I've had just as many, it feels like, all over the place, and they've been successful as in just one big piece of technology.
So probably hard to say one way or the other, but I think that's really helpful in that justification piece to really be able to break those down. Adding some goals really helpful there to be able to get that. So yeah, I hope that answers your question at least a little bit.
And I've never done this, but Mr. Shoulders always said, don't overthink the technology aspect of it. If you're in the shop and an iron worker is your high technology for that, for that class or whatever, it may not be high tech in the sense of computers and VR and stuff like that, but if it's a technology that's going to really help your class or whatever, then that's something that you should write for. He always said that.
Mm-hmm. That's good, and just the reminder that it's not just the Ag Ed department that evaluates those; it's all those program agencies that are also evaluating. So, some of those may have never even heard of an iron worker, would have no idea, or one of those cert machines, have no idea what that is. And so really writing and explaining helps to justify that. So it's good to think of just layman's terms, if you will. If someone has no experience whatsoever, they can now make sense of what you're trying to purchase.
If you're upgrading the shop, if you want to really get a cheater description, you're going to upgrade your weld machines in your shop. Go to Lincoln's website, copy that, put it in there, because they're going to tell you the technology. It's all circuit boards now, it's all computer driven now, so it's not just, we'll just turn it out. It's not that anymore. It's all circuit driven. So you're increasing technology just in helping build your shop program. And anyway, I learned in Texas, where I taught a lot, every 5 years you should take your oldest weld machine and surplus it out and get a new one in, because the technology is changing that fast.
That's good. Any other advice? Mm-hmm.
So when we were writing ours, we chose to play our demographic to our advantage. So Shawnee's a Title I school district that is 100% free and reduced, but we're also one of the largest 5A school districts in the state of Oklahoma. And we have over 1,200 kids in our high school. So when we were writing about our demographic and the things we wanted, we made it sound to the point of, these kids will never see these things and never interact with this stuff unless it is in our classroom, because they can't afford to do it, their parents can't afford to buy it, and they just will never get that information unless that is in our classroom.
Absolutely. Don't forget about, every school is unique in much, in lots of different ways. Even if you're the most traditional school in the world, that now has become such a unique piece of that. So making sure that you talk with a counselor, figure out what those demographics are. Obviously, it's easy whenever it's more of a negative component or negative scope of our students don't have that. But the same thing is also true in much more of our traditional schools. The same thing is also true. They wouldn't have the capability to interact with this equipment unless it's through this grant. So that's important. Yeah, that's a great idea. Any others? Good tips and tricks that you've seen? All right. Well, I think we'll get to the fun part. This does require just a little bit out of you. So I want you to take just a couple of moments independently, and I want you to think through what have you purchased in the past. For those of you that have had a grant, received a grant, what have you purchased in the past? And we're looking for things that have worked really well or things like, not so much. Okay, both of those would apply. If you haven't either applied for a grant or received a grant, then the second question is really for you. What would you like to purchase? What piece of equipment would be really beneficial to you and your program? And if you had $15,000 to spend, what would be an important piece that you would like to add to your program? So I'm going to give you just a little bit to think through those two things. Okay? Then we're going to partner up. So you'd be just eyeballing your partner. Who are you going to work with here in just a second? Okay, so be thinking through just a little bit. Okay? Then we'll partner up. So think through one of these two questions. What have you purchased in the past that's worked well, or maybe you regret, that was a terrible idea, I should never have done that? And if you haven't, what would you like to purchase? And if you're really a rock star, maybe you're answering both questions. I've gotten things in the past, and here's what I'm looking forward to next year. All right, if you've thought through individually, I want you to turn to a partner, grab a partner, talk over these two questions. Talk through these two questions with your partner. Find a partner. All right, as you're kind of wrapping up some thoughts, I think it's really important that we try to record some of this information down, let it be useful to you. So if you weren't taking notes, just so we have a better idea to do that. So Cameron told me I needed a QR code because every good presentation apparently has one of these nowadays. So QR code, this is going to kick you over to a Google Jamboard. If you have not used Jamboard, it's a great tool that you can use in your classroom to be able to collect information, whether it be a question that's posted like this. It could also be a response. We use this sometimes as kind of an empty the cup activity. How are you feeling today? Whatever the case is when students walk in. One of the things to note if you've never used Jamboard, actually, let's just play this game. How many of you have used Jamboard before? What's the biggest issue with Jamboard?
Probably inappropriateness. Well, I've only used it like this, but yeah, the kids, whatever, anything, but anybody else can see.
Okay, well, yes, so everybody can see it, so you do run that risk. What else? Any others?
You have to download the app.
You do not have to download the app.
Yeah,
It's really dumb. You can use a tiny URL instead?
To use it in Safari, I think.
Okay. Sorry? What'd you say?
I thought it was because you had downloaded an app.
No, actually, but I didn't know that you had to, so that's really weird that I did that. So you don't have to own a Chromebook, evidently, so and that's how I use it. It is totally anonymous, so you have no idea what students say. So you really have to threaten some students, like, I can see everything. The truth is you actually cannot see anything
You
whatsoever.
can see
So
who's saying it, but you don't have a record like all the other
Right.
Google Suite. There's not a
Can't keep record of
who
it.
did what. So you can see, you'll be able to see it here. You can see as long as everyone's logged into Gmail, which is what we do at the school.
Right.
But if you're working on multiple pages, you physically can't see. But I tell them that I can, and I have a record of everything. And so don't mess up.
choose your question wisely if you're going to ask students. Don't ask anything that you really didn't want, an anonymous response on. So, no, you can threaten them.
No,
You'll threaten them,
No,
yeah.
I threaten kids daily. And the camera was pointed right at
All right, so one of the easiest ways, if you go and add if you go add a sticky note, then you can write in it.
Is there a way to find it on Safari? Like if I typed in the name or something?
Okay, probably not, but this URL should get you there.
Okay, I did it and it did not work.
All right, Cameron, you led me astray.
I
This doesn't get me there?
To like shout out ideas and you can write them on the whiteboard. No, I know the whiteboard.
That is smart.
You can write on it.
Okay, so you're telling me I got to get more creative.
Yeah, so like professors.
So it's not working? Is it working for anybody? Yeah. Not this one, sorry, this one?
Fine, do it with chalk, I don't care.
So it is working or it's not working? Someone put one up,
It's
so.
working, but if you don't want to download the app, I'm not for sure how you can share. Can you post the QR code again, please?
Yeah,
Is Jamboard a Google app?
yep.
We need to start using this. This is cool. I'm learning. How something went wrong. Let's try it.
It is a Google feature.
Do you know what the code is? I don't even know what the code is, so I don't know.
I did not see a code. I did not. This is the best part about technology when it doesn't work.
Download the app.
There's too many layers.
That's why I'm downloading the app.
Anybody with the link? Some of you are somehow in here.
I still can't see. I said grow for it. Grow for it.
I'll zoom in for you.
Glow for it.
It's like an engraver. They're pretty cool.
That's why I spent my Chromebooks on this year. The laser.
Did you get it?
Yeah.
Did you look at it? Oh, this code.
Working? Not, so it's not working?
No. The,
I'm trying to download the app.
You are not supposed to download an app, so that's weird. Okay. Okay, so we'll make this work somehow. I'll add some sticky notes into this so we can really see it up here. How about that? Okay, so some really short person's been up here. Okay, I'll add some sticky notes in. So if you couldn't get logged into Jamboard, what are some great ideas that you guys shared with your group?
I got the reality work simulator, both kinds, the in-classroom one and the one that you bring the camera out the shop. The only thing on, like the in-classroom one is great if you have a computer that has a high enough graphics card to run the system, because otherwise it's kind of laggy and the kids are, it's lagging. I'm like, calm down, it's fine. And then the one in the shop I only used once or twice, mainly because it's $7,000 and the kids already take their helmets off and set them face down on the tables anyway. I don't want them to do that with a $7,000 helmet, so we're still working on that.
But I did watch some students of yours just the other day who were working independently on the one inside the classroom. So I mean, they They were taking one and run. I watched one student teaching another student how to use the RealityWorks and was just like an expert. So as if he was like a RealityWorks vendor rep in there just teaching another student. So I thought that was really cool of like they picked it up really quick. I don't know how much you've taught them, that one student, but they picked it up very quickly.
I wish I had like more than one, because especially if your idea is to start them in the classroom before you go out to the shop, it would be nice to have more than one so you could have more than one kid do it. But you also, I guess, you could do the peer teaching thing.
Sure. Yeah. Other ideas? Other thoughts? Things that you've seen work?
Anything, I mean, I wasn't from me, but I'm pretty sure anything that relates to like actually running your greenhouse. So like anything that comes from link 4, that'll qualify that link 4.
Spell it. How do you spell it?
LINK 4.
The letter 4 or spelled out 4?
Letter 4.
Okay.
Or number 4.
I knew what you meant. We were on the same page.
Link 4.
Okay, link 4. Okay.
Does that mean like
Like an agro system. Anything that monitors your climate, humidity, because like my agro completely qualifies for. I mean that technology, and that's like, and it's not like $15,000. But if you were to be writing a technology grant that was focusing on like just your greenhouse and updating technology in your greenhouse, anything I grow from link 4.
You're recording this down. You were recording things. Somebody wrote down link 4 already. Maybe that was me. I did it twice. Okay. All right. So seeing some.
I also bought Chromebooks, like a Chromebook and a Chromebook cart.
Okay, Chromebook cart. Also on that one was a high quality color printer. That's something that we've done in the past. Lots of applications that you use. Sometimes you need that little nicer printer. Those can be really expensive than just a traditional black and white printer. So we've spent some money in the past on some nice printers. Teaching aid toolbox, TV screens, Apple TVs, laser engraver, not a plasma table, plasma cam license, VR goggles. I saw that somewhere else. Oculus goggles, tool set. Yes, Mason.
Whoever's doing the VR goggles for horticulture, how? Or what?
This one right here. Whoever did this one was.
What do you do?
So you buy the Oculus goggles, and then there's a software company that has the software, and they send you the license link to it, and you just download it off of their encrypted download software program.
Yeah, but what is it? How does it work?
So it'll let you do, show you how to plant, it'll show you how to make fertilizer, it'll do leaf cuttings, it shows you how to fix your mister system so that you're not flooding your plants, what to do if you have like mites or any kind of bugs or anything in there. And it'll let you do it for animal science too. It'll do dissection, like virtual dissection and injection and birthing and stuff.
Very cool. What do you know what the brand is on it?
It is on a piece of paper on my desk.
Okay, that's fine. I just didn't know if you knew.
I can tell you where the piece of paper is.
Okay. Let me add that in. Drone. We've done a drone before a couple times now. I think those are always really cool, unique for ag programs. Decontamination system. After COVID, I'm assuming that was like tied with like it's helpful after COVID to have some decontamination pieces. Yes.
Decontamination for laptops.
Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely. Labquest handheld system.
So there's this handheld system that takes readings while they're doing scientific things like at the science fair, and it has probes from everything from temperature all the way to, I have one that measures color, so you can look at the color of different leaves. I have one that measures the amount of oxygen in water or the amount of oxygen in air. I even have one that measures like, I mean, you can go as simple as pH and as crazy as like, it'll do force, and it'll do it real time, it'll record it, and you can do a lot of like graphics with it.
So Labquest, you might have a science department that might have some Labquests. There's also kind of, I would call it newer, but I wouldn't call it any better, but Go Direct is kind of the new upgrade version of that. All of those are veneer sensors, and so most of your science departments probably already have a vendor with, they may have a vendor, Bartlesville is one of those, had a vendor set up with veneer, so it's really easy, and in fact, they already had discounts built in for us to make some of those purchases. So really visit, if you're doing some of those types of things, visit with your science department, and they may be able to get a little different discount than what you're going to be able to get, because they're already buying in bulk for many of those things. We started doing some case things, and they use all those. So we buy lots of things, not necessarily technology grants, but just vendors in general, helpful there. So,
John Deere, we talked about VR goggles. John Deere hasn't released it, but I watched Ag Day. I don't know if y'all watched that, but John Deere is about to release a VR goggle on tractor safety, combine operation, implement how to, their mapping system of simulator of how to get into production agriculture, because we have a gap in generations of younger kids going into production agriculture that have no experience. They don't have a family farm link. So John Deere's coming out with some stuff that maybe we all can tap into in the very near.
Perfect. So another great avenue, if you got the VR goggles, here could be another way that you could maybe be interacting with some other pieces there. Very good. Glowforge, we purchased one of those last year. It's a laser engraver basically, but it's like desktop. Really, really kind of cool. A lot of those laser engravers that I've seen in the past are these big, ginormous. This is an all-in-one package deal. So that's really nice. I use it in my classroom. Has a filter system in it, so that's been great.
What I liked about that is if you're going to spring for it, might as well get the filter with it. Otherwise, you have to put the dryer hose vent thing outside. Get the filter. It's easy. It's $1,000, but it's easier because you can put it anywhere in your room. You don't have to worry about putting it on an outside wall. But we use it as a precursor for the plasma cam. So if their CNC or if their CAD design works on the Glowforge and it cuts out the acrylic or the cardboard or the wood, plywood stuff that comes with it, if it makes it on there, then we know the design works. We're not cutting off someone's head or the letters aren't falling off, and then we can go cut it off on the big plasma cam. So that could be your that could be a justification, a stair step, type thing. So
We can make any of these things. I mean, plaques and awards and stuff, but what else? I just didn't know what the
Cups is a pretty big one.
Cups?
Yeah, Yetis.
And the same attachment, here's what it is. Mine's not Glowforge, mine's Epilogue, which I desperately need help with. If someone can help me. The same attachment that rotates your nails will rotate your glass flower base. And you can engrave your school logo, or your sphere, or whatever on a glass flower base, and that's how I justify the Turner attachment.
The goal was a student SAE project. Turns out I don't have the right student yet, so I'm still waiting on that to happen. But the goal was, again, kind of a school-based enterprise where the equipment is there and students could build and design. They're learning all the same principles that we're using outside in the shop, but they can do it kind of in the classroom environment. So,
Somebody bought a Magnolia machine?
I looked into it.
we looked at one. Yep.
It was.
So are you getting one, or?
No.
No, not yet.
Okay.
But I looked into it.
What is the thought process behind that?
Whenever we get the EAC, just something to be able to use with the animals that we'll have there, the school-based enterprise. I haven't fully researched it, but we were just throwing out ideas, and I've looked into it.
What's the machine she mentioned? What's
It's
it?
Magnolia.
Oh, I didn't. They also found that would warm up their vessels before.
Okay, 3 Oculus.
So are you guys gonna get a?
We're not getting one right now. We already have an ultrasound, or we're getting one. Yeah, we're getting one of those. Going through some car Perkins, but yes, we are getting one. So one of the Butterfly IQ ones that you plug into your phone and can use it anywhere and everywhere. So we're getting one. That was like $5,000 for those.
So we said super nice printers and 3D printers. What about banner printers?
Norman did that a couple years ago.
A banner printer?
That's what we're getting this year.
That's what we're getting this year. Is a banner printer.
I'm so glad you know what's on your guys'
She wrote it, so it's it was her year. So banner printer was a good option. We saw one. We saw one at Moore.
Last year.
last year and was super impressed. Yep.
Yeah, Jessica
Yep.
Dunlap.
Jessica Dunlap killing it. So
Huge. Oh, it's so cool.
yes.
Yep.
Yes.
I saw it at Teaching Days.
Yep. Yep.
Has anyone done an Ag Communications Studio grant, like the MacBook Pro and cameras and things of that to produce AgCom stuff?
Did Mr. White do that at Tipton? Did he do it? I think maybe he did an AgCom one, if I remember. It's been a few years. But they did one.
We received one 3 years ago that was from Matt.
So Lawson kind of did a little bit of one for kind of an ag communications one. Yes, with some
Is your
AgMax.
school support Mac or?
Well, we're all through Google, which was annoying, but yeah. Technology-wise, it was.
Okay, let's see. Anything else that digital camera kits, hydroponic tower gardens. We've done a couple of those tower garden systems in the classroom. The camera does with some plant science units. Those have been really awesome to use throughout. I saw a really cool hydroponic system happening at Old Mulgee the other day. There's this really cool. Did you guys purchase that? Is it?
That was Carl Perkins, but
Okay.
it was 10,000, so.
So that could be, they use a really cool system. They're actually doing some kind of research, agri-science fair projects with some of the stuff they got going on there. But that's a really cool, they had the space for it, of course. So they didn't have to build a building, but they were able to put that in there. So that's another great idea.
I have a friend in Arkansas, he had all whole hand tools, and OSHA is moving away from extension cords. So he wrote a technology grant to get all battery-based hand tools, replace everything in the shop with e-walls.
Wow.
So because the OSHA is trying to get away from that, that is a new technology in agriculture. I've not done it myself, I've not looked at the OSHA.
And a kid did find it.
Hey, on the battery, just a tip on the battery powered tools. Milwaukee or DeWalt. Because I personally, the Harbor Freight tool system, it won't hold up to the Milwaukee. We had the Milwaukee at school, and the batteries last for years, and the tools last forever. But the Harbor Freight and Ag teacher budget that I operate at home on, burning through the batteries quickly. Yeah, go red or go home. So that's kind of thing.
All right, any other thoughts that we need to add to our list here? Anything else that you heard or have seen that you liked?
Do you currently have tower gardens?
We do. We have one tower garden right now. Do we have another one up in storage, or we just have that one? Just one. So, did you build it or did you buy it? Okay. Mr. White mentioned about building one. That was kind of an interesting system. So.
Symbiotic aquaponics.
Okay, that's what Brady bought.
And it's 4 beds, but I think it's like 80 square feet growing space. It has 2 big, 200-gallon tanks or whatever.
Gigantic, yes, it's a huge
And so
system.
that was big because we have a smaller greenhouse, kind of like the previous ag teacher built 20, 30 years ago. And so we just devoted that greenhouse to a aquaponics system. And then our big regular greenhouse for
Okay, so
soil
I
based.
have one that's 2 beds, and so it's 1 tank. I don't know how to use it, and I'm waiting for a greenhouse to put it in, but I might be email or calling you.
I'm gonna have to set mine up inside. I got symbiotic aquaponics, and I'm gonna have to set it up inside because I don't have room in my greenhouse, and I had so much damage to my greenhouse because I did. But they make a new, if you have an older one, the tank that holds the water and the fish, Symbiotic is changing their, whatever, it's gonna be skinny enough, it'll go through a standard door. And then he sent me a link to an $80 Home Depot dehumidifier, and he said that's all I needed to run it in the building.
Well, mine's sitting in my shop right now, and unfortunately, it's hard to grow life when you're working in a shop. So it's not working, it's not up and going, which is fine. But I just don't have anywhere else to put it unless I get a greenhouse. But it takes up a lot of space, and it looks really cool though.
All right, so our time is quickly running out. But I think I would just venture to say that there might be a couple of really important takeaways here. One, this is certainly not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination. I'm sure that you're going to continue to hear and see much more. I think, Cameron and I really try that as we go through professional development type things, we're always listening, trying to learn. Hopefully that this can maybe be a spark as we take our conversations elsewhere. Here in just a little bit. I don't know what is so funny. That's awesome. This is the best part of Jamboard. You just never know what they're going to say. So hopefully this will spark maybe some more conversations for you to have. We are more than willing to talk and visit about some ideas that we've had, things that work, things that don't work for us. And I would assume that several of you in this room would also be willing as well. So hopefully build some good connections, see what some other people are doing. I think that's been really helpful as well. I love it. Second round. Okay, I love this. And we're going to delete some of these out. Yes, we will. We will.
Emily's going to send out an email after the conference.
Perfect. Technology. Love it. Love it. Perfect. Well, if no one has anything else, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Tyler's got just a couple of announcements right up here real quick.
Real quick, it's the orange